The wind howled over the vast, empty plains as the sun sank behind the mountains, casting a crimson glow over the decaying silhouette of the old Willow Creek ranch. It had been empty for nearly a decade, the fences half fallen, the barn leaning to one side like a tired old man, and the house itself nearly swallowed by the wild grass that crept up its walls. When Ethan Cole, a 36-year-old ex-cowboy with more scars than smiles, first laid eyes on it, he didn't see what it was. He saw what it could be. After years of drifting, working odd ranch jobs across the Midwest, he had finally saved enough to buy something of his own. People in the nearby town of Meadow Ridge thought he was crazy to buy that place. Haunted, they said. Bad land, whispered others. But Ethan didn't care. He wanted peace, a place where the ghosts in his mind could rest. He signed the papers, bought the ranch for next to nothing, and started cleaning it up alone. The first few weeks were hard but honest. He patched holes in the roof, cleared debris, and replaced broken windows. The nights were eerily quiet except for the coyotes, and though the wind sometimes sounded like voices, he told himself it was just the prairie talking. Then one morning, Ethan had to leave suddenly for a few weeks. His old friend, Jack, had been hurt in a rodeo accident 2 states away. Ethan packed up, locked the ranch, and promised he'd be back to finish the job. He left without looking back, but when he returned 3 weeks later, he felt something was off the moment he turned onto the dirt road leading to his land. The gate, which he always left chained, hung open. Tire tracks, fresh ones, cut through the dust. His heart began to pound, his instincts sharp as ever. As he drove closer, he noticed movement near the house, something fluttering in one of the upstairs windows. He parked his old truck silently, grabbed his lantern and a wrench, and approached the porch, every step crunching softly over gravel. The front door was slightly ajar. He froze. He remembered locking it himself. "Hello?" he called out, his voice steady but low. No answer. Only the faint creak of floorboards somewhere inside. Slowly, he pushed open the door, the hinges crying out in protest. The house smelled different. Warmer, like someone had been cooking. A flicker of fear and curiosity tangled in his chest. The living room that once stood bare now had blankets draped over the couch, and there was a pair of shoes by the hearth, small, worn, clearly belonging to a woman. He took a careful step forward. From upstairs came a soft sound, a whisper, maybe a breath. "Who's there?" he called again, louder this time. Then out of the shadows a figure appeared at the top of the stairs. A woman, maybe in her late 20s, holding a candle. Her eyes widened when she saw him, but she didn't scream. Instead, she said in a trembling voice, "Please, don't throw us out." Ethan froze, his grip on the wrench tightening. "Us?" he repeated. The woman nodded slowly. Behind her, 3 other figures appeared, women of different ages, one holding a child who peeked shyly from her shoulder. The candlelight flickered across their tired faces. They didn't look dangerous. They looked scared. Ethan lowered the wrench but didn't relax. "Who are you people? What are you doing in my house?" he demanded. The oldest among them, perhaps in her 50s, stepped forward and said quietly, "We thought it was abandoned. We didn't mean to trespass." Her voice was steady but sad, the kind that carried a lifetime of hardship. Ethan looked around again, blankets on the floor, an old kettle steaming gently on the stove, a small pile of food cans neatly stacked by the counter. They had been living there. "How long?" he asked. The younger woman hesitated, then whispered, "Since the storm." "About 2 weeks." Ethan rubbed his face. "You can't just move into someone's house." The child whimpered softly, clutching her mother's leg. Something about that tiny sound broke through his irritation. He sighed deeply. "Where did you come from?" The women exchanged uneasy looks. Finally, the oldest spoke again. "We were running from someone. We can't go back." Ethan studied them carefully, the dirt under their nails, the bruises on the youngest woman's wrist, the fear in their eyes. It was clear they weren't lying. "Running from who?" he asked. Silence. Then the woman said, barely above a whisper, "From the man who owned us." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Owned you?" The word hit him like a hammer. They didn't elaborate, but the way the younger ones flinched told him enough. He took a long breath and stepped aside. "All right," he said finally. "No one's throwing anybody out tonight. You can stay for now, but come morning, I need to understand everything." Relief washed over their faces like rain on dry land. As the night settled, Ethan sat by the fire with them, listening to the crackle of wood and the occasional sniffle from the child. They didn't talk much. The oldest woman, whose name he learned was Martha, thanked him softly. The others, Lucy, June, and Clara, kept mostly silent, as if words might wake the ghosts that followed them. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. He kept his lantern on and his eyes half open, watching the shadows dance across the old wooden walls. Who were these women? What had they escaped from? And why had fate brought them to his land of all places? He didn't have the answers yet, but deep down, something told him that this wasn't coincidence. The abandoned ranch, the voices on the wind, the open gate. It all felt like a story that had been waiting for him to walk into it. By dawn, he knew one thing for sure. Whatever their secret was, it wasn't finished with them, and now it wasn't finished with him either. The morning sun spilled through the cracks in the old ranch house, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands, his mind racing with the events of the night before. The four women were awake, moving quietly around him, Martha cooking something simple over the stove, Lucy washing dishes, June folding the blankets, and Clara tending to her little girl Emma. It felt strange, the house suddenly alive after being silent for so long. Yet beneath that new warmth there was a heavy air of unspoken truth. They were hiding something, and Ethan knew it. When breakfast was over, he finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You said you were running from someone," he began, looking at Martha. "I need to know who." The women exchanged looks, fear flickering between them. Martha sighed deeply, her shoulders sagging as if the weight of years pressed down on her. "We worked at a place called the Hollow Creek Farm," she said slowly. "A man named Victor owned it. He wasn't just cruel, he was evil. He made us live there, work day and night, said he was helping us, but he kept us like prisoners. When we tried to leave, he hunted us down." Ethan clenched his jaw. He'd heard stories like that. Before, isolated farms where desperate people were taken advantage of, but hearing it from their trembling lips made it real. "How did you get away?" he asked quietly. "The storm," Lucy whispered. "It tore the place apart. He was drunk that night. We ran while the power was out and just kept walking. They'd wandered for days, cold, hungry, and terrified. When they found his ranch, they saw the boarded windows, the broken fences, and thought it was abandoned. They'd moved in, meaning to stay only a night or two, but the safety of the walls kept them there." Ethan listened, the anger in his chest building, not at them, but at the man who had done this. "You're safe here," he said finally. "No one's going to touch you while I'm around." The way Clara looked at him then, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief, made him realize just how little kindness they'd known. For the next few days, Ethan tried to return to his normal work, fixing the barn roof, repairing the fences, and tending to the small herd of cattle he'd just bought. But life at the ranch had changed. The women insisted on helping. Martha cooked hearty meals, June cleaned and even painted the porch. Lucy learned to ride the old mare, and little Emma followed Ethan everywhere, calling him Mr. Cowboy. Slowly, laughter began to echo through the halls again. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long while: home. But just as things started to feel right, trouble came riding down the road. One afternoon, as Ethan was working near the barn, he noticed dust rising from the distant trail, a black pickup truck unfamiliar. His gut twisted. He wiped his hands and waited as it drew closer. When it stopped by the gate, a tall man stepped out. Broad shoulders, slick hair, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Afternoon," the man said. "Name's Victor Hayes. I'm looking for some women went missing from my property a few weeks back." Ethan's blood went cold. "Don't know what you're talking about," he replied flatly. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Funny thing. Someone in town said a cowboy bought this old ranch and been keeping company with a few new faces." Ethan crossed his arms. "You should leave." Victor chuckled, taking a slow step forward. "See, I don't think you understand. Those girls belong to me." That word "belong" snapped something inside Ethan. "They don't belong to anyone," he said, stepping closer, voice low and dangerous. Victor's grin vanished. "Careful, cowboy," he hissed. "You don't want to make enemies you can't handle." Ethan stood tall. "Get off my land." For a tense moment, neither man moved. Then Victor spat in the dirt, climbed back into his truck and drove off, leaving a trail of dust and a promise of trouble behind him. That night, Ethan told Martha what happened. Fear gripped the women again, their newfound peace shattering. "He'll come back," Lucy whispered, trembling. Ethan nodded. "Let him. But next time he won't find you, scared." He spent the next days quietly, preparing, reinforcing the doors, fixing the locks, even setting up old motion lights. He taught the women how to shoot his spare rifle, though they hesitated at first. "If he comes," Ethan said, "you protect that little girl first." "Understood." They nodded. But despite his precautions, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that fate had something else planned. Days passed in uneasy calm until one stormy night. Headlights swept across the yard again. Ethan was already waiting on the porch, rifle in hand. The truck stopped, doors slammed, and Victor's voice cut through the wind. "You can't hide them forever, Cole," he shouted. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cruel grin on his face and the two men standing beside him, armed. Martha and the others huddled inside, terrified, but Ethan's eyes were cold steel. "You're trespassing," he called back. "Turn around." "Not without what's mine," Victor snarled. The thunder rolled, drowning out the sound of Ethan cocking his rifle. "They were never yours." The air went still. Then chaos exploded. Gunfire cracked through the night. Ethan ducked behind the porch rail, returning fire. One of Victor's men went down. The other fled, but Victor pressed forward, shouting curses into the rain. Inside, the women screamed as a window shattered. Clara shielded Emma. Martha grabbed the rifle Ethan had given her, and Lucy pulled June toward the cellar. The storm howled like a living thing. Ethan moved through the shadows, circling toward Victor's truck. When lightning struck again, he saw him. Victor standing near the barn, reloading. Ethan took aim, his finger trembling. But before he could shoot, Martha's voice rang out. "Victor, enough!" She stepped into the open, rain drenching her hair, eyes blazing. "You don't own us anymore." Victor turned, face twisting in rage. "You think he can protect you? You're nothing without me." He raised his gun, but before he could fire, Ethan tackled him to the ground. They struggled in the mud, fists and fury flying. Years of pain and anger poured out of Ethan as he fought, not just for them, but for every soul broken by men like Victor. Finally, with one last surge, he disarmed him and threw the weapon aside. "It's over," Ethan growled. But Victor wasn't finished. He lunged for a knife at his belt, only to freeze as a loud click echoed behind him. Martha stood there, rifle aimed steady, hands trembling but eyes strong. "No," she said softly. "It's over for you." The sheriff arrived before dawn, called by neighbors who'd heard the gunfire. Victor was taken away in cuffs, cursing all the way. The women were free at last. As the sun rose over Willow Creek Ranch, its golden light broke through the rain clouds, painting everything in hope. Ethan stood on the porch, bruised and exhausted, watching Martha and the others laugh for the first time. Clara smiled at him, tears in her eyes. "We don't know how to thank you." Ethan shook his head. "You don't have to, just live." Over the weeks that followed, the ranch transformed. Together, they rebuilt the barn, painted the fences, planted flowers by the porch. The land, once abandoned and cursed by silence, was now full of life and laughter. And as for Ethan, he found something he never expected: family. He often sat by the fire at night, watching Emma play and listening to the women talk about their dreams. And he realized that sometimes the people who stumble into your life broken are the ones who help you heal too. The ranch had given them all a second chance. Months passed and the Willow Creek Ranch began to bloom again. What once was a place of dust and silence had become a living heartbeat on the prairie. The fences stood tall, the barn doors gleamed with fresh paint, and laughter spilled from the porch every evening as the sun dipped low. Ethan never imagined he'd see such peace in his lifetime. After years of drifting alone, he'd finally found people who gave his days meaning. Martha with her quiet wisdom, Lucy's fiery courage, June's gentle kindness, and Clara's shy, steady strength. Little Emma had grown bolder too, always chasing the chickens or tugging at Ethan's sleeve to tell him some wild story about clouds and angels. But deep down, Ethan knew healing wasn't simple. The scars Victor had left on them weren't all visible. Sometimes in the stillness of the night, he'd hear Martha crying softly in her room, or see Lucy flinch at sudden noises. They were free. Yes, but freedom, he realized, was something you had to learn to live with. One evening, as autumn painted the land gold, Ethan sat on the porch with Clara. The air smelled of pine and smoke, the stars beginning to blink awake. She spoke quietly, her voice trembling. "Do you ever think about the past?" He nodded. "Every day. But I try not to let it steal today." Clara smiled faintly. "You've done more for us than anyone ever has. I don't know how to repay that." Ethan looked at her then, not just as the woman he'd rescued, but as someone who had fought her own war and survived. "You already did," he said. "You stayed." For a moment, silence hung between them, full of something neither dared name, but they didn't need to. The night spoke for them. As winter approached, life tested them again. The cattle got sick, a roof beam cracked under heavy snow, and money grew tight. Ethan was ready to sell some of his stock when Martha stopped him. "We're not running anymore," she said firmly. "We'll help." The women worked beside him through the bitter cold, Lucy repairing fences, June learning to ride out to the pasture, Clara taking charge of the books. It wasn't just Ethan's ranch anymore. It was theirs too. Together they endured, and slowly the land rewarded them. When spring came, the first calf was born, and the air was full of promise again. Then one morning a letter arrived, a legal notice from the county. Victor Hayes had died in prison. For a long moment no one spoke. Clara finally whispered, "So it's really over." Martha nodded. "It's over for good." They burned the letter that night, letting the ashes scatter into the wind like the final ghosts leaving their lives. From that day forward, Willow Creek Ranch wasn't just a home. It became a sanctuary. Women from nearby towns who'd fallen on hard times came seeking work, and Martha opened her arms to them. They started calling it Haven Hill. Ethan taught the younger ones how to ride. Lucy managed the horses, and June ran a small shop selling handmade goods. The place grew into something beautiful, a testament to resilience, love, and second chances. And though Ethan never spoke much about his feelings, everyone knew he'd found something. Worth more than land or money, he'd found belonging. On the first anniversary of that stormy night, they all gathered by the fire telling stories, laughter echoing through the dark. Emma climbed into Ethan's lap and said softly, "Mama says you saved us." Ethan smiled and shook his head. "No, little one. You all saved me." Outside, the wind carried that laughter across the fields, whispering through the grass where ghosts once lingered. The abandoned ranch had found new life, and the cowboy, who once came seeking solitude, had instead found a family that would never leave.